So the next thing we have is this compare item. So now we can compare time periods side by side. So to the previous year, previous period, and custom period. Now we'll talk more about creating these comparative reports later, but you'll recall that we made this comparison by basically just selecting a 2-year time frame and then displaying it in years, which gave me this breakout. So that's one way that you can do a type of comparative report. Notice when you do this, it shows from left to right, oldest to newest. If I compare this way and do this comparison, it's going to give me let's change this to 2020. Let's change this to 2025. So January to December 2025. If I look at the previous year here, then it's going to give me the current period and the previous period for 2025 and then 2024, meaning it shows the most current period first. I can choose the previous period, which will be similar. We'll talk more about that in future presentations. And then I have a custom period, and then we could calculate the variance. Now notice the first method that I used, if I had 3 years comparison, then of course I couldn't really subtract the two. But if I'm comparing just 2 periods, like last year and this year, or last month and this month, last quarter and this quarter, then I can look at the dollar change, and then I can look at the percentage change. We'll talk more about that later, how to calculate those percentages. And then in certain instances, you might have the percentage of a row and a percentage of a column, which can help us to make some comparative reports and vertical analysis type of reports. We'll talk more about those later. These are tools that allow us to do a lot of those comparative reports that sometimes QuickBooks puts in the reports areas as reports that have already been created. If we understand how to use or make the comparative reports, it's a lot better because we have a lot more flexibility to customize the reports that we want to create. Let's close that out. We've got our filters up top. Now, usually the filtering options are what you're going to use like on transaction detail reports, but it'll give you your filtering options up top here, and vendors, and so on and so forth. But again, usually this filter report will be in something like if I go into, say, the checking account, now I'm in a transaction report, and oftentimes there's going to be a lot of detail within the transaction report. So I might then filter within the transaction report by the transaction type is often most common. Now notice it already has a filter of the account. So that's kind of there by default in this new view because we're filtering by the checking account. So if you also then want to filter again by the transaction type, you want to add another filter, and then we'd add and filter by transaction type, for example, boom, possibly most common, and then maybe have it equal to, and then maybe we'll have it equal to a check form. So then we'll add the check form. What happened? Check form. Now you could have multiple things that you could check off too, instead of just one, and that gives me a filter down. So that's often, again, useful in long detailed reports like general ledger type of reports, which are typically these transaction type of reports. And then of course we can add other filters. We can basically filter by the headers up top, which would give us the date filters, but that we have the filters of date up top. So the transactions possibly the most common. Numbers could be useful. Names, things like customers, vendors could be a useful filter, as well as the memo. And then the account could give us a filter type as well in terms of the other account affected. But if there's multiple accounts, this will be a split. So that's going to be the filter options. Let's go back.